my pleasure now to introduce Pascal Mittermaier. And Pascal is a very experienced person in the matters of which he's going to be speaking. He lives in Manchester as a senior boy in high school and a girl who just is going to be a sophomore at McGill. And Pascal is formerly of the Nature Conservancy and their Global Cities program. Flew all over the world for a number of years, helping different cities develop plans and how to go greener under funding from the Nature Conservancy. He's now, taking some time off and consulting and working with different green startups. Looking forward very much to this presentation on his hometown of Fryeburg, Germany, where he grew up and where his parents still live. And he knows the town pretty well, and he knows how it's transformed from a coal mining town into a very green, thriving city in Germany of approximately the same size as Gloucester, Cape Ann. So I think we are all looking forward to this, Pascal, and please take over now. Thank you very much.
Hi, thanks, Dick. Hi, everyone. So can everyone see the screen here? I'm going to be talking about the town of Freiburg in Germany. So it's where my dad grew up. Okay. It's a town, it's a little bit bigger, Dick, than Gloucester. It's a town of about 300,000 inhabitants. And you can see it's tucked right in the corner of France, Switzerland, and Germany. And it benefits a lot from this very multinational location. Can everyone see this next slide?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to tee up the city a little bit. You can see it's a medieval city. It's got a gorgeous cathedral and a big market square. But you can also see in the background it has a lot of modern buildings. It has quite a well-known university and lots of research related to kind of its success in sustainability. So keep that in mind. And this next picture shows a typical street view of what's going on in Fryeburg. And already in medieval times, in the Middle Ages, there was a very strong focus on water and water management. And so the town has lots of these little man-made creeks running through it, and it's a way to maintain, that's how they clean the streets. And you can also see in these pictures the tremendous focus on bicycling. So I'm going to talk about green transport and the amount of bicycling that's done in some of the sustainable cities that I've seen. So I'm using Fryeburg as an example of how a city can transform itself from what you've seen to a very sustainable city. And the good news is that cities tend to very openly copy each other. So cities are inspired by the success of other cities, and cities have no problems copying each other. So using what works in one place,
this earbuds,
trying to implement it in others.
Not working anymore. What? So it's obviously I know I bought new earbuds.
Can everyone still hear me? Because I think there's a couple conversations going on that might not be on mute. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes.
So what I was saying is that cities often inspire each other, and mayors are parts of very effective networks where one city might test an idea and then a bunch of other cities will implement that. And so that's true for the world's biggest cities, but it's also true for smaller cities like this one in Fryeburg. This next picture that I'm showing you here is actually the catalyst of what got Fryeburg started to becoming this very sustainable city. And for those who know your history, Germany after the Second World War was occupied by the Allied forces, and Fryeburg was part of the French occupational zone. And this picture is of Vauban, the former French military barracks that was on the outskirts of Freiburg. And so when the French troops left Germany in the 1980s, this entire area became available for living and working, and so really allowed the city to have this new area to start up and implement a bunch of interesting sustainability features. And as a result, over the last 3 or 4 decades, Freiburg is often mentioned as being one of the greenest cities in the world. You can see here's an article from The Guardian, and I think if you Google Freiburg and sustainability, you'll often see this said, and just look at the amazing pictures of how they've transformed some of those military barracks into incredible nature and living and working environments. And so in the next few minutes, I'd just like to unpack some of the things that they've specifically done, and then we can see whether we find any connection or relevance to Gloucester or to the North Shore. So Dick, can everyone still see my slides? Passive house? Okay, good. So the first thing Freiburg focused on was transforming a lot of these old military barracks into the most efficient energy homes possible. And over the last decades, Freiburg has become a world leader in the design of passive house. So essentially homes that are so well insulated and so well designed that they can be heated by solar energy and essentially by the people living in them. And the fabulous thing about this, so I visited this city several times, and these projects, most people living in these homes and these apartments are paying about 50 euros a year in energy bills. So in heating bills and in lighting bills, and that's because the homes are so efficiently designed. And so this focus on window efficiency, fabric efficiency, insulation is the first step, I think, in what helps cities become more sustainable and more resilient to energy policies. So passive house was one of the first things that Freiburg did, and it's since become one of the most knowledgeable places on passive house refurbish and passive house design. So energy efficiency is one of the key things they focused on. The second thing Freiburg focused on was, as you can see in this next picture, was renewable energy, and in this case, solar energy. And especially in the part of Freiburg that I mentioned in Vauban, you can see almost every home is completely covered in solar panels. And again, as such, Freiburg has become a leader in the world in solar energy technology and research and development. And remember, this is not the sunniest place in the world by any means. You know, we're still talking about Germany, southern Germany. So they have really milked the potential of solar energy to the maximum. And you can see that almost every single grouping of homes here has solar energy, and if they don't have solar energy, you can see in the bottom, the very bottom 3 homes have green roofs that are efficient for other reasons, so for cooling the homes or for collecting rainwater. This next picture, I think, is a really interesting lesson learned too. So again, you can see the solar panels on the roof here, but the point I want to make with this slide is Freiburg really pioneered the work, living, and multi-generational concept for which it's grown very famous. So the ground floor typically would be a business or a store. The middle floor would be where a family might live, and the top floor is where their parents might live. So there's this real focus on mixing up business and then multi-generational living. And the idea here is about not creating ghettos and not creating areas that are dead at night, but really creating homes that serve multiple, or buildings that serve multiple purposes at multiple times of the day. And so I thought that was a really interesting way that not only do you reduce commute time, but you create an environment where multiple generations can live together at the same time. So the next thing Freiburg's really famous for is green infrastructure. So all throughout the city, you'll see these ditches and these natural canals, and when it rains, they fill with water, and the nature, the earth, the roots are filtering the water, slowing it down, and so what flows out eventually into the surrounding rivers and lakes is much cleaner, has already been filtered by nature, rather than just flowing straight off a street or a pavement and then, you know, collecting all of the dirt and debris and flowing at high rates into the surrounding rivers. And the reason that's so important is that the fastest growing rate of pollution in our rivers and oceans is from urban stormwater runoff. So managing this in this kind of elegant and exciting way, I think, was very inspirational. This next slide shows another picture. So all over Fryeburg, you will see these little ditches and then these connecting pipes that, when it rains, and it rains quite a lot there, allows the water just to flow through these types of natural infrastructures. And that's the connection that I made to the early picture of Fryeburg when I showed you the kind of medieval ways that they had that they were managing water. The next, oops, yeah. The next slide that I want to show is very much related to the kind of place Fryeburg has become today. So if you visit Fryeburg as a tourist, at pretty much any given time of the day, you will bump into an official city tour. So sometimes, on some days, they organize up to 6 tours. This particular tour that I took a photo of is of a group of Indian mayors and city planners. And what's really great to see is that the kids who live in the city will wave at the tours, and they'll know that their city is being visited and is being admired by city planners all over the world for the kind of work that they've done. So there's this tremendous local connection and local pride in the way that the city's put itself on the map. And again, look at the awesome nature design in the background here, these green walls that they've put up. But this is really exciting. And if we think of what could be in a place like Gloucester, or how could we turn a place like Gloucester into a place where tours would come to learn whatever. And so this is I thought was a really nice way to kind of show what happens when a city gets known for something, in this case, sustainability.
Hey,
Check out this.
well, we're on that last photo. Were those vines of hops growing in the background?
I'm not sure what these are. It's a good question. I mean, that would be full circle economy right there.
It rather looks like it. That's why I asked. It would be very iconic.
This next picture, this is the high school in Vauban, and so you can see the high school is completely integrated into this kind of green, deeply inclusive and comprehensive way. You can walk over it and, you know, imagine going to school in a place like that and the kind of connection it forms between you and nature and green infrastructure and things like that. So, you know, it's a very comprehensive design. And this next slide is probably my favorite, and I think kind of encompasses everything that I love about Freiburg. So you can still see the skeleton of the military barracks here. But all of these homes look out onto a common area. So if you're a parent and you're, you know, either in the kitchen or in one of the rooms, you can always look out and you can watch a bunch of kids play safely in a place with no cars. And when it rains, this entire area floods up and slowly absorbs and sponges up the water. And so a big part of Fryeburg is not everyone has their own garden. There's a big focus on community gardens and community grow gardens. And I just think this is a really good picture. It encompasses the passive house, the solar energy, the green roofs, the community gardens, the gardens that act as rain gardens, and so on. And so there are a lot of really interesting things that this city has achieved. And as I mentioned, up to 6 tours a day of, literally urban planners and mayors visiting to be inspired by this and to see what works. And so my last slide is really about how this happened. And I met several times kind of the guru that got this whole thing going. He was essentially the lead urban planner. His name is Wolf Dazeking, and you can see tons of YouTube videos on presentations that he does. But essentially, here are some of the things that I picked up from him. So one is, have a comprehensive vision of what you want your city to be. So while a lot of this stuff did flow organically, they set some very clear guidelines for what they want it to be. We want to be renewable energy. We want to be low energy homes. We want to have nature featured. And so he talks a lot about this vision and rallying people around. And I think that's what this group here is trying to do. He's a radical guy. He says, think big, don't worry about being the outlier, the mainstream will follow. And one of the biggest examples he mentions is eliminate the car. And there are entire parts of Freiburg where there's no cars at all. And zip cars and car sharing is a big deal, and garages are expensive and even frowned upon. And so it's all about walking and cycling and public transport. He talked to me a lot about selling the economics. Wouldn't you love to live in a home that only spent X dollars a year on electricity and on heating? Wouldn't you love to live in a place where you don't have to commute and you can just work downstairs and so on? So really, talk economics as much as the vision. And then it's not 100% I don't think you can overlay everything to what's going on here in the US, but he talked a lot about the limits of gentrification. So really focusing on making the community multi-generational, working and living in the same place, smallish homes. So the average home there is somewhere between 700 and 1,200 square feet, but big public spaces. And maybe the thing I'll leave everyone with is Fryeburg measures really interesting things. They measure how many people know their neighbors' first names. They measure all kinds of, and every year they publish this report, and that's an indicator of how the community is doing, how happy people are, how connected people are. And so they don't just measure how rich people are, they measure all kinds of other community indicators. And then the last thing he said, and this very dear to what I've been doing the last 10 years, nature can help solve a ton of issues. Use nature as infrastructure rather than just cement and pipes and the things we're always used to. So maybe I'll stop here, Dick, but I hope this gives you an idea of some of the things that are unusual about this little town and how they went about doing it. And so I'm happy to answer any questions or get some feedback on what you thought on about these slides.
Thank you so much, Pascal. This is fascinating. And we've got some questions submitted in advance that Candace Wheeler is going to ask you, and then I'll be asking a few questions from the chat function. So go ahead, Candace.
The first question is, given the decline of the Gloucester fishing industry and the current recession, unemployment is a serious problem. How can we bring green jobs to Gloucester that provide good, stable employment for people with several different levels of education and experience? Did Fryeburg succeed in creating a significant number of new jobs? And if so, what types of jobs?
I think that's a great question. So I mentioned that over the last 4 or 5 decades, Fryeburg really has become a world leader in the research and development of solar energy. Fryeburg is one of the places in the world that has tested and implemented both the retrofit and also the new build of passive house design. And so I think those are two examples where what's happening in the city and the things that are, that work particularly well have in turn made the city created different kinds of jobs and fostered new kinds of industry. And so I don't know enough about the situation in Gloucester, but I could imagine a parallel to that would be, what if Gloucester became the world leader in using sensor technology for, the most sustainable kind of fishing possible? Or what if, so we would have to, I know there's lots of work going on like this, but we'd have to take a look at, so what are the strengths and what are the trends that Gloucester believes will be part of its future? And then how does that shape itself into the fabric of what the city's becoming?
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And the next question that we got was, how much of Freiburg's green development was enabled by its destruction during World War II and its being a university town? And also, how does it fit into the overall German 2050 environmental plan?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. So actually, Freiburg was not heavily destroyed during the Second World War. It didn't have enough industry. But clearly, as you can see, the city benefited from this kind of blank slate of these military barracks that were vacated. And so, maybe that gave it a leg up. And at first, I don't know if you remember the images of the German Green parties, these guys who knitted their own sweaters while they were in Parliament, and they all had wild beards, and they were this kind of crazy group of people. That was sort of the group of people that gravitated towards that type of development. Mm-hmm. But over the last few decades, Freiburg has become a completely mainstream, there's people like us living there. And it's actually, a lot of the radical people think it's become too vanilla already. So I think, sorry, I forgot the third part of the question.
The third part was, how does Freiburg fit into the overall German 2050 environmental plan?
Yeah, so Freiburg has a leg up in the sense that a lot of its energy, is renewable or green energy, and a lot of the transport and other factors are sort of part of the way the city operates. I think it's a really important question. When the Fukushima disaster occurred in Japan, Germany was one of the first countries to very quickly ban and go away from nuclear energy, and they closed all of their remaining nuclear facilities. And since then, Germany has had record carbon emissions every single year. And so because it now relies heavily on coal. So I would say Freiburg is probably a shining light in the way that a lot of other German cities and German municipalities are trying to deal with clean energy.
Interesting. The next one was, what are some of the things that we can do in our small town? And we certainly have some wonderful examples there. Have you seen things that you think are particularly ripe for development here on the North Shore?
So I do, and so I've just picked Freiburg because I'm familiar with that and I have a family connection there. But let me give you another example. There's a city in Tuscany that has become the world leader in Tuscany in Italy, that has become the world leader in waste incineration. There are cities in the Netherlands that are, where more than 65% of all trips in the city are done by bicycle. And so I think what I'm trying to say here is it's important to pick something that fits with the tradition and the culture and the history of a city and see whether that can become one of the guiding principles that helps transform other parts of the city life there. And so this example of, is it realistic for Gloucester to become a leader in some new marine technology and that then becomes something that that becomes a thread throughout the way the city wants to be 20 or 30 years from now. I think that could be an example of that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad to say that development of biomarine technology is already underway here with their Genomic Institute that opened just in the last couple of years.
That's right.
Dick, do I have time for one more? I'll just take that to be a yes, because I didn't hear an answer.
Yes, go ahead.
What were the biggest obstacles faced in the green transition in Freiburg, and how were those overcome?
So I think if you ever meet Wolf Dazeking, or if you see some of his YouTube presentations, he is a really forceful, very intense character. And so he describes how the first 10 years were met with constant obstacles on why this wasn't a good idea. And, you know, the car in Germany is even more sacred than it is here in the US. And, you know, designing entire city areas of the city that were car-free. A lot of the obstacles around green infrastructure were, you know, this doesn't look good when it's flooded with water, or what if someone falls in and drowns? And so I would say this very clear positive vision of where the city's going, and then kind of a relentless, you know, overcoming of these daily obstacles is what was part of Freiberg's story.
One more. How did the politicians in Freiburg get on board with the Freiburg Green New Deal? Were they leading from the beginning, or did they follow after a grassroots push?
I think it was a mixture of both. I'm not sure that they imagined from the onset all of these interesting things that I was able to observe. For example, I don't think they anticipated that the city would one day run 5 or 6 city tours a day focused on these kinds of things. So I would say it was probably a mix, although that vision of what do we want this place to be, and what does great look like, I think was probably at the heart of what got this thing going in the 1980s.
Thank you so much, Candace and Pascal.